for that to come back, which is basically going to stipulate that from here on, any reference to Board of Selectmen in prior documents will be
Yeah,
it's
a challenge because you have to be able to have from the past and then future documents. Somebody has, it's like, almost like when you change your mortgage, when you sell your mortgage, you change your mortgage from a trust to something else, you gotta do all kinds of things.
I don't
won't have to go into every
As long
document.
as it's simple, I'm for it. When I hear 3 weeks of KP spending time on this, it worries me.
No.
It's been done by dozens and dozens and dozens of towns.
Yes,
no
of course
trouble.
it's doable.
So we're gonna follow a template, it's gonna be very straightforward.
Well, I get the impression
It's
that
easy.
none of us
Next.
disagree anyway, so we gotta get our mindset to the fact that we are a board of select persons rather than a board of selectmen.
Right.
And I can
That's
say
all we gotta do.
wholeheartedly that Lauren has not been working 3 straight weeks on that. It's simply, it's been flagged for
Okay,
it,
next.
it's on the radar.
You flagged it 3
It's on
weeks
next.
ago.
We'll be ready for
Next,
that.
adoption and housekeeping. Can you define those?
Yeah,
What's
so
adoption?
so basically, again, talking with Lauren, my understanding, and I'll know more when I get it back from her, some information, is that when the town administrator position was adopted, there were some items within there that just need to be
Okay,
cleaned.
I suggest that we drop that one totally this year. KP was involved in doing it the first time, they did it, there's all kinds of history, wound up going to the Attorney General, the Attorney General got sick over it, we fought for 4 or 5 months with the Attorney General and KP to get something that was acceptable to everybody. Lauren may very well want to clean this up after she messed it up 12 years ago. My suggestion is not this year. It is not worth it. We know we have legal money that we're worried about. Do we have enough legal money? And that is not worth it. And I don't want to get into a thing with the
Well, we may not have to
Attorney
do, I
General.
think what you're saying is that we may not have to do a discussion on town meeting floor about that issue.
Not this year. We can build a case for whatever it is that
Yeah.
Lauren thinks we should be doing over the next year to get this thing, if she feels the cleanup, and I understand, but the Attorney General was involved with this one.
You'll clarify that anyway over a period of time, working with.
Yeah, my understanding, we talked with Lauren again 3 weeks ago when we sat down, was this was something she brought to me and said,
Yes,
you need to
good.
it needs to be concerned that she
That's
basically
fine.
said,
Yeah.
Take it out. Is my
You
No, I
suggestion.
don't-
can
Next, no.
decide if
Next.
we need to
What was
leave
the
it.
benefit of doing this? Why was she suggesting we do this adoption and housekeeping?
No, it was not a suggestion from them, it was a suggestion from residents who have,
Or they-
over time, been talking about wanting to do this. And the last was Marshall Hook coming, saying, I'm gonna do a citizen's petition.
No,
No,
this is
we're
not,
on the
this is
next
We're on
the
item
next one,
4.
the next one.
We're on the town administrator, housekeeping,
Housekeeping.
and adoption.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
So what was the benefit Lauren saw of us doing this?
it's just technical, making sure it's my position as the town administrator and the language associated with it in the town code is in compliance and correct to what it should be based on what other communities have done when they've adopted the town administrator position. I don't know the details because
There were some issues.
I'm waiting for her to give me, she said, I've already got the language ready, I'll send it to you. It's just, she's been busy.
So this is a placeholder, and when you get more from Lauren.
When I
It's a
have that in the
Topsfield
draft, my
specific
plan is
issue
to
because
provide
of
it in the
mistakes
first
that
draft
were
to you
made.
folks, and if you don't want it at that point, we'll nix it, if you do,
Fine.
we'll
Next.
continue.
That's fine.
Yep.
The next was a solar development pilot. We have, I've mentioned this before, we have a solar developer who's looking to do a project up on Aaron Drive. And one of the things around that would be that if they do the solar array, there's the standard operating procedure in communities, we did this in Beverly, is to create a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. What was shared with me was that to allow us to enter into a
Into
pilot.
an agreement. So the question in my mind is there things that we have to, there's no statutes or anything else that we have to approve in order to do this. This is a matter of giving us authority to negotiate to do this pilot. So I'll have to read it. There's a the DLS, the Department of Local Services, has a separate bulletin that they put out on it. And Tula knows about it. We want to do this. What it is utilities now, for example, on poles, they pay taxes on the poles. That was a change about 10 years ago.
Who pays taxes on the pole?
AT&T, Verizon, AT&T, whoever owns the poles.
Okay.
So,
As part of their facility.
but not necessarily on this, so that's why it has value, but beyond, you want to get more than just the taxable, not the taxable value of it, yeah.
Did we get anything on this? I don't know what the content of
This
this
is well written up. I should spend more time reading it through. It's well written up.
Did we all get a copy of this? I don't know what this development is or what it would do for the town.
So
We have-
there's nothing for the town. This is
Nothing
private
gets submitted.
party.
It's a private developer.
Private party who owns a piece of land. They've gone through the conscom to find out where this could be put, legally, not as wetlands, so to speak, get all the setbacks. All of that's been done. And so that has nothing to do with solar or not, it's just their land.
Mhm.
Now that that's done, the people who want to site the solar are in the process of siting the solar and planning how much they would put in, where they put it in. What are they gonna do with it? We don't know whether, it'll continue to be owned by Skeffington, or whether they'll go to the town and, to the planning board and divide up the property so that that's owned by that separate utility. I mean, those details aren't understood, but the net is that this company is gonna put all the solar in, they're gonna generate electricity. The solar panels have value, asset value, which you can tax, but it's to get more out of it than all of that.
What
as
I'm
part of
hearing
this
is in
plan.
lieu of taxes. Are our taxes going down, the tax
Yes.
income?
Yes,
that
the
we're
income could
receiving?
help bring down our taxes,
But
Help bring down their taxes or the town
the
taxes?
town taxes.
Taxes
Well,
paid
what
to
it
the
will
town.
do is money that will be put in our budget on an annual basis.
From who?
So
Who
the
pays
land-
that money?
From this, if you would, utility company.
The solar company?
we
who
get
It's
buys
over
credits,
the
company.
money?
we get
And
credits.
that, and that's the negotiation that you have to get into with them to get the pilot stuff and all
Who's
that.
doing the negotiation?
I will.
Ah,
I mean,
Okay.
there's years of this in the marketplace in different communities, there's sort of the standard, what the size of the array will be and what you typically would see as a pilot as for it.
And
So-
is the end result that we would be getting more money just through another source, not taxes, it would be coming through in these credits? Or is it a wash?
It would look like taxes, except you don't write them a tax bill.
When you finish
But
your
you don't have to
negotiations,
write
have
the
we
tax
made
bill.
money?
You may come out a little bit ahead, you may.
Okay, and so why is it a good thing for us to do, to go through all that
Because
outfit?
we won't,
Just come out a little
there's,
ahead.
Otherwise you get nothing.
you get nothing, right? So there's basically a very gray area in the law when it comes to if you can tax personal property for the solar arrays that are going in. And what every community has done is that they've come to an agreement ahead of time with the solar array.
Yeah, I'd love to see a write-up on that, I don't know much about it. That'd be great.
If you look at solar array tax credits, you just Google that, you'll see, Google solar array
But
tax
even
credits.
like which
Massachusetts.
property, this is Aaron Drive, is that what?
Yeah.
So they have not
Well,
officially submitted
it's
any
off
design.
Aaron
It's off
Drive.
of Aaron
It's
Drive.
way in back of, or there's a,
Way up
gravel
by
road.
Pino's Osteria.
So once this project becomes an official project, we'll have formal plans that have been submitted.
Okay.
They'll go through the planning board, they go through the necessary approval processes in public settings to discuss it. What we're gonna be doing, and I've mentioned the project review team, the first kind of kickoff project review team meeting will be with these folks. I had a high-level preliminary conversation with them. That's why this is here, is because we wanted to put this in here. If this deal falls apart, they decide I'm not gonna do solar, I think they're going to, but if they don't, that's okay. This just gives us the right to negotiate that pilot, but if we miss the opportunity to put this language into the warrant, we then miss that opportunity.
So the town is giving us permission for you to enter into negotiations?
Board of Selectmen or designate, correct?
Yeah.
yeah, that's.
The two sign this agreement basically for this piece of property.
And
If
the
we
town
don't
has to
do it,
sign off on
then,
that?
yeah,
to
then we
give
don't get
approval?
anything. They keep all the credits for their own purposes. This is a way, it's very much like with the, when we were doing the marijuana thing, we had the community agreement and so on to arrange to get some money from that. It was kind of a negotiation. That's a little bit grayer and looser area. There's not as much example of that. But This is functionally kind of the similar. You get something, it's not taxes, but it has very specific value, and there's a much longer track record of what are kind of sort of acceptable deals. And most importantly, they're not getting challenged in court with marijuana ones are.
It may be a wash for the town, in my opinion, okay? But with the movement afoot today to try to make green communities and less pollution and solar power and wind power, there's a movement everywhere in the country to try.
And the other thing is, talk about how everything ties to everything. There are certain grants that if you can say you have an approved project in town that is providing credits to the town, you get points and consideration as.
And if we don't negotiate with them, they can do it anyway.
Then we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
get anything.
Well,
They can do
Oh, yeah,
it,
they
Yeah, they have to go
We
through
can't
the
stop
permitting
it.
process, but they can do it anyway.
and then they'll pay their taxes the way it normally would be done,
But lower.
but low.
The next one is I call it a mechanical placeholder. This is one right before Catherine took some time. She flagged and asked to be put on the list. It revolves around the,
Yeah, clean up
Yeah,
after
just
this.
closing that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cleanup, we talked about that, that's pretty straightforward.
the next one's the
And,
address.
and actually, I think it also would include rescind then on the water treatment plant, correct?
It might be.
It might, I'd have to double check. I know when she comes back, that's one of my agenda items. I wanna make sure I have a better understanding
Yeah.
of the what's within it.
Yeah, ask about the treatment plant too, then.
I will do.
Address standardization is a great thing to have. It's been talked about for a long
We've
time.
done it,
The
yeah.
question is, how much effort is it in the next 6 weeks to get it agreed upon and in place?
We already have language, so basically there's standard language.
It's easy, it's
Yeah.
done.
It's not done, but we have all the information.
And we have
put together.
you have the most important thing, 100 people that are an issue, we know who they are, and they're grandfathered until we can get a discussion with them.
We're gonna treat it as a small town should. We're gonna address them individually and have a conversation about what it means for them.
And they may, and if there's a problem, they may be able to live with it for the next 20 years until they move.
Possibly. We can work through that.
I wouldn't touch that beyond that.
It comes back to, I'm hearing this started with the assessing office, but it also goes into public safety.
RATC, all that stuff.
And
It's
it,
definitely public
Okay, it's
safety.
easy, the important thing is that it's easy, it's not gonna be an issue.
no, I don't,
Okay.
it's just plug and play to a certain degree, making sure the language is checked by the.
What's the veterans exemption?
So there's a state, chapter 59, clause 22G, which basically stipulates that if a service member is killed as a result of their
Deployment.
whether physically in action or as a result of an injury that they receive subsequently when they return, that the widow can have an exemption on their taxes,
Is that a full exemption?
full exemption,
For how long?
perpetuity until the home's sold.
Till the home is sold, or the widow passes, or
Yes.
is it inherited by the kids if the family stays?
I believe it's just for the widow.
For the widow,
It's in, the language is very specific, it's standard that any community.
that
adopts.
house, that widow, so if she moves to another home in town, then that may go away.
Is
I
that the
can
case?
answer that question for you, I'd have to look deeper into it.
Yeah, okay, just get it clear, because I think that needs to be explained when we.
I don't have, if you give me 1 second, I can read the exact language.
Nobody's gonna vote against
No,
that.
don't worry.
Nobody's gonna vote against the
But,
veterans.
you gave us 5922G, so we can look it up ourselves.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
by the way, when you do this thing, if you know it's a particular thing, it's good to just add it in there, because it
Yeah.
makes it easy.
Yep.
Go ahead. Community Septic Management Program, is this where
The
we help
200,000?
with financing if they don't have the money?
Correct, MGL-C,
Is an adoption of that, which
It's
allows us to do that?
it
In
allows.
other words, somebody doesn't have, they have a failed septic system and they don't have the money to put down $30,000 to put it in. This provides tools and techniques that allow them to fund that over a period of time at low budget, at low interest.
Access is state money, right?
So it's a pool of money that's available for towns to take a loan out,
Yeah.
use that money to then loan out subsequently to the residents of town.
Up to 200,000 a year,
Total,
Total.
total?
Oh,
for the
well,
town.
So it's rolling, So if someone pays off their loan, more money is
It
freed
opens
up
back up again.
for someone else to
Correct.
come in.
So if we,
Okay.
off the onset, we'll probably have maybe 5 or 6, depending on what the cost is associated with it, if we have that much interest at all, I'm not sure. Once they start paying it back, that fund will be replenished, and then, 2 or 3 years, whatever that count amounts to, we'll have enough money for the next person that comes.
Who manages that in our town hall?
So it's gonna be the treasurer's office, the collector's office, the accounting office, and the board of health.
Is this something new that the state came up with and is offering?
It's not new, it's been around for a little bit of time, I don't know the exact date, but a lot of communities who are septic communities have adopted this.
Have we had a request for this? Have people had trouble in town? And that's why we're pursuing it this year?
We had at least one 2 years ago, yeah.
It helps,
I don't think there are gonna be a lot of people that take advantage.
it helps when there's a real problem and the people
But
truly
we
can't
have to come up with the
afford.
200,000, is that right?
Well, we borrow it off of the state to implement the program.
And then
Yeah,
the people
it's not
pay it
our
back.
money, it's not our money, it's our overhead.
Okay, it's not our
To
money at
manage
all.
it.
We just manage,
We
we
just
manage the
take it
station.
in, we're liable for
I
the
think we're
interest on
liable
it.
for it.
We're liable
I
on the
think so.
interest, and then we send
Yeah,
that out,
right.
and then we have to receive it. But if, for instance,
But we don't have to
Temporary.
fund it directly,
No.
200,000 at
comes
that
in and
point.
out, it
At that
doesn't,
point.
it's
There's
not.
no approval of funding in
When you
this.
say we're liable for the interest,
Sounds
the
like a
people who are
chapter.
taking out the loans are paying the interest, but if they default, we're liable on the interest?
So the way it would operationally work is we would take.
No, we're gonna borrow,
We
no.
gotta
it's
give it
different.
back.
One
Yeah, we're
conversation,
gonna-
please.
We gotta-
One
We're gonna
conversation.
borrow what we need and pay interest on it.
One
and
conversation,
give it
Kevin,
Give it back.
go ahead, please.
So we would take the monies from the state at, I think it's a 3% interest rate, and then we would then loan that money out at either 3%, we could do 4%, whatever we decide is appropriate mechanically from an operation standpoint. If someone were to pay back and then a year from now, for some reason, financial hardship, a lien goes onto the property. And so we have the ability to recoup our losses. We won't be forfeiting any of those costs, in theory. I mean,
But we still have to pay the state the 3%.
we'll still, right, so then basically, if we're still paying the 3% interest on that loan, and they stop paying us, we'll recoup it, be able to then pay back those losses.
This is
Theoretically,
only when somebody owns the property, it's not for the sale of a property. That's not the intent of it anyway. I don't know how.
as soon as they
control
sell it, then
Does it
the gain
specify
is
that
lost,
it's not?
because they can't do it then.
It was 2 questions, sir.
Does it specify that it's not in that case?
If the person,
I'm sure it is, but I don't know. I
if the
don't know where
person
the
who
wording
takes
is,
out
but
the
it's also
loan
very
to
hard,
get
you
it
know,
to
somebody
pass,
does it
as soon
once.
as they sell, bang, the deal ends, they've gotta take it out of their proceeds and pay it back. It does not revert to the new owner.
I
Right.
just
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, not for the new
Yeah.
one,
It's the
right.
owner is the key, and when the owner sells, even if it's to set it up to sell, they have to do it.
But it sounded like
They get
you
the
were
proceeds,
saying
they pay it back.
They
you
have to
weren't
pay it.
interested in having that situation, it's for someone who's living in the house, not to help prepare them
That's the
for
intent,
sale.
somebody
That's
who's
the
living
intent, yeah.
in the house and
Basically-
has a failure and essentially can't live in the house because it's unusable
Yeah.
with a failed system. They have to put it in, where am I gonna get $30,000? The bank gonna give me a loan on that or whatever? So that's where this comes in to help out.
It'll be interesting to see if it stipulates you cannot do a sale of a house, because you could have someone in a financial situation where they have to sell the
You can't.
house.
But
You
you
can't
can
do it.
sell
You
it, but you
can.
can sell a
You can
house.
do it on the sale of a
So you can
house.
take it
Yes.
out, do the work, pay the interest, and when the sale happens, and you receive those funds, that loan then can be paid.
They have to
Yeah,
pay
because
it
I
off
was gonna
right
say, I
away.
don't think they could draw that fine line.
What they're trying to do is take leaky, bad septic systems that are polluting local streams or whatever,
That's right.
and get rid of them. And the mechanisms to be sure that the
Well,
town,
for-
state are paid are built into that.
For whatever reason, there are people that fail Title V
Yeah,
and they can't afford to put in a new system that provides them money to do that.
essentially, it's a cheap bank
That's the
offer.
basic- that's
They
the
don't have to
basic
go out and get a home improvement loan at
That's the answer to the
7%.
question about for a sale of home.
And the payment schedule on these loans are actually, the dollar amount is included in, I think, the first and third quarter bills. So it would be built right in, so we're not looking for a separate check to come in.
Built into
It's part of their
tax.
taxes, so if they don't pay that, they're in default, just like they would if they didn't pay their taxes.
And that's why we can put the lien on,
Yeah.
because that's taxes.
Wendy will be up here later to talk about exotic animals. If there's any specific questions, she certainly can walk you through
Yeah.
that. The,
Criminal disposition.
so we ran into a situation recently a few weeks ago where our Board of Health inspector went to a property at the request of a tenant. When there, she identified that there were not any smoke detectors installed. She reached out in a formal letter and asked the owner of the property to rectify the situation. Basically, they called and said, no, I'm not. So basically, the only next step she could take currently under the way her role is written is that she has to take out a criminal complaint against that person, which costs us money by having to have an attorney support that effort. And so as we went through this process, I said, we need to come up with a way where we can write fines and get someone's attention that way, rather than skipping the point where we might actually receive some funds, and we're expending those funds on something as simple as putting smoke detectors in just because the person decided they were not going to be cooperative. So we managed that process with very little overhead costs in that particular example I gave you, but that is really the only mechanism she currently has. So the thought being, right now it is.
Let me tell you, the letter from the attorney saying you go into court, we'll get the things put in. So we can do this criminal disposition. I don't believe the town, and we had this twice on our warrant, and Lauren was well aware of it. And it was voted down 2 times to expand this non-criminal disposition to anything. People in the town of Topsfield do not want that kind of power just running around giving people fines. So we have a solution, which you pointed out, criminal, and write that letter, and yes, we can use KMP to do it. It may cost us a little money now and then, but it gets the job done and doesn't get us into one of these things where everybody in the town has got the authority to give out fines to the people and the citizens of the town. This is a small town, people tend to be cooperative. Yeah, okay, we got a tenant here and somebody who lives someplace else and owns the property and isn't doing it, okay. The message will get out very quickly. The last time this happened, by the way, they went to court. Oh, they actually didn't go to court. They got the summons, and yes, they fixed the problem. People get, the offenders will get the message very quickly.
So the example I did give, unfortunately, we did have to have an attorney from KP go to court, and then they continued the case. So it was actually, I said, it wasn't a large amount of money we spent because there wasn't a long drawn-out court case on it. But, you know, my purpose of putting in there is I just wanted, and I didn't know the history there, so that was very helpful. So again,
Can you fine tune
Just-
what the fines are for, so it's not just all over the place?
Well, you can, but I can tell you how this is being written at a distance. I know in the past. This is a general ability to write tickets. The health inspector that we got the last time came from Brookline, I believe, and he couldn't wait to get his ticket book out with check marks that would allow him to do fines to anybody and everybody. Because that's what he did
Well,
in
the
Brookline.
fact of the matter is, if we put that on the warrant and it didn't pass, we can always do what you're talking about.
Well, that's what we have now, it's the only tool we have now.
But it's our responsibility, we own the warrant to do things which are good for the town and for the citizens, which is the town. So it's not a matter of, we have the warrant and we'll throw everything up. We gotta make some decisions.
Yeah,
That's what people look to us for.
I think the question is, and you've actually, that was a very helpful explanation, Dick. In one sense too, I think putting up and letting the citizens decide rather than us, there's a rationale for that. The other side is, if there's a history, and this might be worth checking, on having put these up and them not passing, then I can see the possibility. It's not a common enough thing that I'm overly worried one way or another, to be quite honest.
We
So,
lived a long time without it, is that what you're saying?
how expensive was it then in that one case?
I don't have the exact dollar amounts, but we had to have had a couple of conversations over the phone with one of the attorneys at KP explaining the situation. They needed to do a little bit of prep work on the case, and then we had to go to court on a Tuesday, and Wendy met the attorney there. Like I said, it was continued, after they arised, and I believe it was resolved because his attorney, the person we were suing, criminal complaint against, I think did some work on the side to get it done.
And this was for a smoke detector not being?
It was a lot of it was a lot of time spent from you talk about efficiencies within an organization, you know. This sort of called out to me as something where a lot of time was spent on a smoke detector, a lot of money was spent on a smoke detector. If there's a history there and a desire not to pass it, I will follow your lead on it. I just wanted to flag it as something that we need to
Well,
consider.
I'm sure we spent several hundreds of dollars with KP.
You've got it
Yeah,
there,
Wendy's-
you've
Wendy's
got it
time.
there, it's a placeholder in my opinion.
Mhm.
Talk to Wendy and tell her that it doesn't appear that the Board of Selectmen are terribly excited about this, and see what she says.
I'd like to talk about that,
Okay,
and
here
I'm
the
also
references,
not against putting it up.
2007, 34, 2008, 27.
What are those?
What does it mean?
Those are, you asked about the history of it. Those are the articles.
Oh,
2007, 34, and 2008, 27.
Can I just ask, why was the inspector in the house?
the tenant called for some, a lot of times constituents call, whether they're the homeowner or renter, if they're invited into the house to inspect the home for a potential violation of, a health violation, and they're invited into the home, they can go in, and when they're there, if they observe an additional violation,
Then they can fine you for those,
well, not, it depends on the violation.
if this passes.
In theory, but I mean, the process would be, we could set it up just from an operational standpoint, that the same way we do with signs. I mean, to a certain extent, you get X amount of notices, if you don't comply, you then receive a fine. But there's a number of ways you can.
See, in that case, I mean, sort of, it's not really a mid-ground, it's another point, but what if Wendy had the authority to alert the fire department, and the fire department goes and makes an inspection? It's against the law not to have fire alarms. Then it becomes the fire department. Are we still sort of in the same morass?
So so we tried to do that with Glenn, and seeing if there was I don't believe the smoke detectors fell under Glenn in this instance, so he was looking at a roof issue with the house instead, to try to lump them together. We were trying to think creatively, we really didn't want to go to court. That was our goal, was not to spend the money or to really, I kept saying, I don't want to be in the front page of the Telegram, somebody
Yeah,
saying.
we don't want to sue a tenant.
Right, right.
If we can
It
help
was
it.
the owner, you
The
said.
owner would be.
This
The
is
tenant,
the
I'm sorry, the owner.
Well, but we would prefer not to be a heavy-handed.
That's right, that's right.
Okay.
And so this was a step that, you know, like I said, to me, it's a step we could consider to sort of avoid getting that heavy with the hand, because it's sort of, you go from here, please do it, to, all right, we're gonna take you to criminal.
Talk to Wendy about it, and if you come back to us and feel really strongly, and she feels really strongly, then we can debate it some more, but
And I personally don't have
pretty
a problem.
high-handed, I mean, pretty heavy-handed stuff.
Yeah.
I agree.
I personally don't have a problem with putting it to the voters again. It's their town, they get to decide. If they once again decide the way they have in the past, well, so be it. And I'll accept that with a smile. But I don't agree that we should decide what's good for the voters to decide upon. It's more a matter of efficiency and trying to lead rather than react.
It's curious, having, you know, because we have tenants, and if there's an issue, they don't go to the town. They call us if for some reason something's not working.
But what if you don't do something?
They can bring the state down on us.
How?
They contact the Attorney General, and we're in huge trouble as a landlord if we don't have working smoke detectors. And, you know, you can get very heavily fined and penalized if you're a
So-
landlord and you're not following.
So the
rules.
question then would be, in that kind of
There's
situation,
another way, I think, on this one.
if the state was called as
Such a
opposed
clear law.
to the town,
Right,
would
the
it
state
be a
takes
different
care of it.
process?
Yeah, the tenant goes to the state.
Well, Wendy's gonna be joining us on the exotic animals.
Okay.
So-
Let's hold off on
Maybe
further
we shouldn't spend a
conversation
lot
now.
of time on it, though, we've got a lot of other things to do. I'm
Let's-
willing to talk with Wendy about it, but we've got a lot to do.
Let's continue on, I think we skipped down to Planning Board Article 16.
So it's the ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations. It's cleanup, it's taking out language, requiring an interconnection agreement. to receive approval at the planning board level. This is from Martha. It's from Donna by Martha and Martha Morrison. And this is basically the way the order of operations work is that when you're going through the planning board approval process, when this was written 10 years ago, it was sort of new, but right now there's an interconnection agreement that's necessary, but that might necessarily occur until after the planning board acts on it. And if they are unable to get that interconnection agreement with National Grid, then the solar mount array will not go forward. And so it's the time and cost of the applicant to take that risk without the interconnection agreement, and that's, I think, what's the thoughts behind this.
Well, my thing is, Martha tends to know what she's doing and have a schedule and knows how much time she has to do things. You remember when she talked to us about trying to do a new zone? She explained why that was, but she knows what she's doing on these things. I would feel pretty confident with her to be able to do this.
What's in
It's the
layman's
planning.
term, in layman's terms, what is this saying?
So if you go for a solar array, like we're
I
talking
don't
there,
know, I
drive.
don't know what it means, what it does mean though is that we do have a bylaw that was put in place, as Kevin said, 10 years ago, and has certain rules so that people can't just put something in and we don't know about it.
So if you're trying to install
So it's a process
solar,
for permission
okay,
to put in a solar array. And what it is a cleanup. Now, if you want, Kevin will give you the details on what the cleanup is. My case is, at this point, that's one that Martha's got under control. She knows what she's doing, she'll get it done. We should understand the details at some point.
yeah, I just
but-
wanna be able to speak to it, I don't know. So it's cleaning up the details so the process is better for the end consumer, it's not gonna hold them up?
Well, right now, it's, yeah, it's, yes, because if you wait till the interconnection agreement, a lot of those incentives, the way the blocks work with the incentives from the state, there's usually timeframes around them, so each one of these developers try to move as efficiently through the process as possible. Waiting for that interconnection agreement is pretty burdensome. It's not common in these types of ordinances.
Okay, so this is improving customer service relative to people trying to put in solar if we tweak the bylaw?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
They still need to have the interconnection agreement. That
It's just a timing of when it comes through?
at our level, we don't necessarily care about that. It doesn't sound right to say that we don't care. Of course we care, but it's not necessary. The interconnection agreement is a separate thing they need to work out with National Grid, and National Grid, if they deny, and then the project's dead. If we accept the project with the assumption that they'll get that or that approval,
Okay,
that should be an issue. So,
great,
yeah.
thank you.
And I could probably, the last couple ones are really clean up, and do you mind if I just take 5 more minutes to tackle the last
Yep.
ones? Sign regulations, it's the A-frame signs. My understanding is that there's some issues with, right now, A-frame signs being on public property, and the timing of when those A-frame signs are up. They're up 24/7 versus during regular business hours. This might not, their planning board's still talking through this one if they want to make this and ask for this adoption, but that is what it is, so it's a placeholder for the moment.
I'm not sure I understand why, public property, so this is not a business, this is when somebody, like, we wanna put up a sign that says, today is election day, tomorrow is, town meeting?
Sorry, I probably gave too much color in the sense of, that's not necessarily relevant, because they put it on our property, we can tell them to move it off. And-
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
So
just
that's
part of
not
it.
the issue.
That's not an
That
issue.
sort of triggered the conversation, and then the issue is that people are leaving them up 24 hours a
Yeah,
day.
they are.
And that the Glenn's indicated that, and to the planning board is also looking to try to say, they can be out, but during regular business hours, which is common.
Yeah.
You put it out in the open, you
reasonable.
take
That's
it.
reasonable.
So this, the way the signs are right now, a lot of A-frames came down. Because
Yes.
they were
Well, a lot of
up.
them went away, no
Yeah.
question.
So is this putting them back up, but
No.
just during
No,
business
no,
hours?
no.
I don't know.
I don't know what this is
It's the
saying.
ones
I
that
don't know.
are out, just stay out all the time, they kind of get forgotten.
I don't see any of those anymore.
Oh, yeah, I see some.
Well,
Where-
there's a few.
Yeah, there's a few
And they
around.
keep them up overnight,
Yeah, just leave them out.
Yeah.
Just leave them out.
not during business hours? I never see anything other than during business hours. I see
Oh.
people put them out, there were a couple of,
There
I
have
won't name
been-
who they
Well,
are,
you're not
but
downtown.
there are firms who
There
put them
have
out,
been
but then
the
they're
case.
gone.
You're not
No, they
downtown
have
in the
been-
middle of
there
the
have
night,
been
that's
some,
why
yeah.
you don't see it.
No, I don't know what this is doing then.
Well,
It's just making it so they have to be taken down, that way they're paying
Uh-huh.
attention to it, we count the number of days and so on.
Is this coming from
That's
Glenn,
what they
Planning
wanted
board.
to do.
planning board?
They
So
wanted
this
to
is
do-
Based on
saying-
Glenn going to the planning board, I take it.
Conversations with Glenn, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically that's
So this is saying when
I
you
haven't
have them
spoken
up,
with
you have to
Glenn.
take them down when your business closes? Is that what?
That's
that
my
means?
understanding.
Yeah.
The reason I don't have much more behind this is because they're still sort of working through this one. They wanted the
Let's wait to see what the
placeholder.
final.
A
is before we
placeholder,
get
which
to
means they may
shape
not
about
be
it.
doing it.
The ground solar, they told, that one's clear, they know what they wanna
Yeah,
make the
yeah.
change on. This one, they're still having some specific conversations
Yeah,
around the details.
Okay,
We'll come back to it.
That's the general, my general understanding what that is. The planning board, medical marijuana, this was requested of me a week ago.
Mhm.
Yesterday it was asked to be taken off.
Mhm.
So that one can be from the by the planning
Okay.
board and then from the planning board.
so you're not
That's-
gonna remove the
okay.
overlay, in other words, not now, okay.
Because of the
That's
green
fine.
belt, it's protected.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they,
we're
but they
already
decided
set,
not to
okay.
do it.
They don't want to.
Yeah, good, okay.
I hope this one's the securing of the abandoned pump
Candlewood.
on Candlewood. My understanding, talking with Greg and trying to get with him, our schedules haven't lined up, is that there is a abandoned pump that is become the ownership of the town. The water department does not have jurisdiction on it, but it's become a safety issue. He did send me some photos of it, if anyone's been up there, it's an abandoned pump that basically has a lot of material, it's in sort of a bunker, concrete bunker, a lot of material, and it's a well at the end of the day, so I believe it is open and not secure.
It's part of that private water system that used to be down there on
Skeffington's
Candlewood.
water system.
That's what it
You
is.
know about, it, right?
Skeffington's
right?
Yeah,
water
we've had to pay an assessment, I live on Kendall.
Oh, yeah, you know, that's what I mean. So this is that particular infrastructure that was left there
Yeah,
when the town took over the water. And so the issue is, it's there,
yeah.
and somebody needs to do something with it based on a citizen
Well,
bringing
Greg
it
has
forward.
obviously
It was open, so someone could
indicated
fall
some
in.
concern.
It's
It's a
dangerous.
dangerous spot.
Yeah.
Public
It's
safety
an
issue.
attractive nuisance, if you would, for kids. And
That
the
is
question is, what do you do with it?
So we have a quote for $22,000 to do it, to secure it. To which I said, we need to do better. So I'm trying to line up a meeting, Debbie's working on it right now, between Greg, Gary, our highway superintendent, and Steve Shepherd. And I just wanna find out what our existing resources, kind of talk about the consolidation, right? Trying to find out what our collective resources are to do it potentially in-house.
Mhm.
Can we just, what's $25,000?
Just clean it up.
Actually, yeah, just make it safe, rather than spending $25,000 on an abandoned pump house. So, this is more of a placeholder at this point.
It may go away. if
My
we
hope
can
is
make
it
a
will.
deal. Yeah.
If it doesn't, I'm just gonna show, get on camera and say that. Just do it myself. Wendy, thank you for your patience.
No problem.
Before we go directly into the conversation around exotic, the bylaw and the exotic, the wild or exotic animals for
Mhm.
entertainment,
Mhm.
we do have an item in the warrant that basically removes the Board of Health, who is, it was the selectmen, the Board of Health and the police department, who are the enforcing bodies for the regulations that were passed, as I understand, at last town meeting, around this,
Mhm.
this request. And I'll summarize for Wendy, fill in the blanks if I'm off, but basically there has been a lot of conversation through the Board of Health about what jurisdiction they might have or expertise around it. And there was a memo that was sent out, sort of affirming what their position was on it, which is that the Board of Health should not have jurisdiction on that. And so this is a placeholder to remove the Board of Health as the body, one of the three bodies of jurisdiction. I'll also say too, as more of a broader component of that conversation, that the police department and collectively us, it might be challenging you talk about having ticket books and writing tickets.
Yeah.
In essence, we would have that authority at that point to go out to someone's, petting zoo or their birthday party or whatever it might be and write fines. I don't know if that's, if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm going
Well, I
off
was
the track.
just, the bylaw is actually very clear about not discussing private properties, so birthday parties
Oh,
were not considered part of covered businesses or
Sorry.
events. No, I just, they're
Yeah.
very clear in here that it wasn't meant to affect the local birthday party, it was public events, I believe they actually really spelled out fairs and festivals, circus, carnivals, traveling shows, exhibits, or similar
Yeah.
events. There was a lot of information that I sort of gathered through this, and it really seemed to be very specific to this short list of animals. And so there's things that weren't included that would be considered exotic or wild, but they are not protected by this bylaw. So it's a very narrowly focused,
Is that bad or
bylaw.
good?
If you want to protect wild animals, it is bad. If you are looking to prevent fairs and festivals from having anything but your domestic cows, horses, pigs, then it is good.
That was the intent.
It's a little tiny bit vague though under entertainment because it does say carnival, traveling show, fair, or presentation in which wild or exotic animals are required to perform tricks or are used in performances for the amusement of an audience.
Which includes a birthday
That
party.
includes a birthday party.
It does, I mean, it's interpretation, but it
Yeah.
includes a
I mean,
birthday
it
party.
could, if you consider an audience a group of kids.
And I guess that interpretation was given to me by the person who had a serious piece of putting it
Preparing
together.
that, intent in other words.
The
Martha
intent
Sanders.
might have
Martha
been that.
Sanders.
It's the
Yeah.
intent, but
That's
the
where it came
intent
from.
really makes no difference, it's the wording
It's what's left behind
that
on
the
paper.
court, the court determines is the fact.
Which we can adjust if.
So it was entertainment, replication of a traditional wild animal circus, carnival, traveling show, fair, a presentation where they're required to perform tricks for the amusement of an audience.
Are you looking up in definitions?
Yes, so that was where we kind of pulled
So
that
under
out.
entertainment here,
Pardon?
Do you have a copy?
so any
I'm looking at it.
You have it.
This-
performance for the
right here.
amusement of an audience.
The same as this, right?
I believe, yes. it's
Yeah,
on
and I
the board
think it was
document.
the traveling show,
So then they go further to define a traveling show
right?
in the next one, yeah. So what are we discussing?
So the-
The amended language?
So the amended language for the purpose of the warrant would be to remove the Board of Health as oversight. Enforcing.
And the police?
Well, someone, if you're gonna have an ordinance with some teeth to it, you obviously have to have somebody who,
You
when
gotta
they
have
call
the
the,
police, yeah. You
when
gotta
they
have
call us,
somebody
somebody,
involved.
I don't know if the police though, the same way the Board of Health looked at it, if they dug deep into it, would say, oh yeah, this is right in our, something that we can handle. It's a unique ordinance, it's not something that's a state regulation at the local level we adopted, it was created, as you know, at the local level, so there's some nuances in it. I spoke with Peter Mulholland at some great length this week on it, because, as we were having the conversation about who's the enforcing body, I wanted to talk to the animal inspector as well. He went away unfortunately, and didn't have a chance to provide some additional information, but he was gonna contact the Division of Agricultural Resources, Division of
I
Animal.
talked with him 6 months ago on it too.
Okay,
And he goes to those meetings and they haven't talked about any of this kind of thing, it's not his responsibility area. His area is domestic animals and barns and chickens and things like that. I mean, that's what the animal inspector is there to do. The animal inspector also does protect us sometimes from rabid animals, because.
Wild and domesticated.
So, but the idea of going after this, I think he must have indicated that he has no background in that.
his biggest concern is because, to that point, the fact that it is an exotic animal and that his job is, there's a state regulation that basically outlines what he does as an animal inspector, that this would probably be beyond the scope of what the animal inspector does by charter, by their responsibilities.
By statute.
By statute, thank you.
Yes.
So, we're just trying,
We could
same
give it
effort.
to him, but it's clearly out, he's not doing it as the animal inspector. He's doing it as another job.
He's doing it as a designee of
Non-responsible.
the selectmen. He would be doing it as a designee of the selectmen.
Yeah, yeah.
I sent you the outline of his job,
Mhm.
and it did seem to have a space for animal issues that the selectmen.
That's right.
Appropriate.
So there's opportunities, so because the Board of Selectmen do have that authority on the designee component of it, that, you know, if we identified, if it's the animal inspector or somebody else, if we created a brand new position for this, which I don't think is necessary, that's
This
another
is
site.
qualitatively different than inspecting domestic animals. That's checking on health, conditions and things.
Correct,
Here, it's, the animal is either present or not.
that's right. Does he identify it as a cougar? Or is he
And
identified as a lion?
so it's basically animal recognition, and I know, I saw, you know, what's a cougar wolf mix or a cougar dog mix, you know, who knows? Would be cougar and a dog, but all I'm saying is that somebody has to identify or say that this is it, and then it's not a factor that they're healthy, how they're being treated or anything like that. That is, to this bylaws, I understand it, irrelevant. This was really designed to avoid the presence here on the basis that if the presence was prohibited, then any bothersome treatment would be.
Is the animal inspector willing to do that as a designee of the Board of
He
Selectmen?
did not seem opposed to it. He did caution that there are some, when I spoke with him, he wasn't opposed to it. I had a very good conversation, he's a very nice man. And he wanted to help, and I think that he just wants to do a little more due diligence, and he's gonna come back to me with it. So, you know, Mr. Chair, that's a great point, you know, it's identification. I mean, if anyone, I don't know if he's necessarily well suited for non-domestic animals to identify if it's a cheetah or a lion or what have you.
It's probably better than us.
It's probably closer to it.
But you have to ask yourself, if somebody looks at it and it looks like a lion, and he says it's a lion, it's a lion. If he looks at it and says, gee, that doesn't look like a lion to me, then it's a call that that person made. Whether you make it, or I make it, or Peter Mulholland makes it, it's a call. Now, if the call was wrong, what happens? Does the world stop? Does somebody get hurt? Does anything? I mean, we're making a mountain out of a molehill on this thing. It's a relatively simple judgment call that this animal fits one of these things. If somebody makes a mistake, okay, I mean, the world doesn't stop. Can they take it up higher? Yeah, they can come to a selectmen's meeting and say, I think that that animal is a lion. Well, how do you want to provide it for being a lion? On and on and on. It's always going to be a judgment call. The one problem in here, though, is that it suggests that if you have some crossbreeding, then it's still that wild animal. And that's the sort of thing that I took out of this, because you can't do that. Now you're into doing a DNA. Well, it doesn't look like a lion, but it's a lion. I'm telling you it's a lion. Okay, how do I know? Well, you take the DNA and you'll find that there was a 2/3 dog and a 1/3 lion in it. We're not into that. And I don't think the people who write this thing, well, not the people who write this thing, not the people who passed it, think that we're going to do DNA testing to determine whether there's some lion in some animal that shouldn't be here. My suggestion is, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Make it the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. If we decide today or a year from now that Peter Mulholland will help us with it, fine. Let's find out how often it happens. Let's have them call us. We can pass it on to say, Kevin, I got a call that they want to have a birthday party with this animal. Is it all right? Well, Kevin, give them a call back and tell them if it's all right. Or send us a picture of what they're going to bring for the birthday party.
Sure.
Okay, that doesn't look like an ocelot, doesn't look like a lion, doesn't look like an elephant. Yeah, it's okay.
But it mostly goes the other direction, because there is a long history of frauds of acts, circus acts, and the classics are always large dogs being shaved to look like lions, because lions are expensive and difficult to maintain and so on. A dog's a dog. So there's a lot of history of non-dangerous animals being presented to be dangerous. There's not a long history of non-dangerous animals being camouflaged. Come see the half lion. It just doesn't ring, you know.
We're making a mountain out of a molehill, for my
Yeah.
sake, and what we
If
want
we
to do
reserve the right,
is-
we're probably fine.
So my
Right.
I guess my ask from the board, if you're comfortable, this is in line with what Selectman Gant just recommended, which is that if I can work with Peter Mulholland and see if he has the appetite or the ability to work with us if and when this situation comes up, it's gonna be so rare that I'll be part of the conversation. I'm sure we'll be flagging it for you because it's an interesting type of subject. And in the meantime, and the reason I wanted to just make sure Wendy was here was on that specific language for the warrant purposes, for the Board of Health to be removed from that based on the Board of Health's prior recommendation or motion
Yeah.
movement that they did. to
It's
just clean that up.
not a health issue either
Right, there's no.
practically nor in the mind
Not
of the,
human health
of
issue.
Martha and so on.
Okay, so,
the other
so
thing too
we're,
is-
we're not involved now with whether Peter Mulholland's gonna do it or not. What we're involved with now is the wording of the last sentence as to who is responsible.
And
And.
Well,
if
it
you are
reverts
with
to the
police,
board.
I talked with the
Up to
police
the
chief.
first.
My suggestion is, keep it simple. It's the Board of Selectmen. If the Board of Selectmen want to, you don't have to put in the Board of Selectmen can have their agent. It's up to us. If we decide to have Peter Mulholland in the future, fine. We don't have to put the wording in here about the animal inspector or whatever else. It's the Board of Selectmen
Yep.
that's responsible. So that's not the biggest part. The biggest, that's my suggestion, is the responsible for enforcing it.
Well, I do like that or its designee staying in there. The
Okay,
Board of
that's
Selectmen
fine.
or its designee.
Yeah, which is not in
Okay,
the last
fine.
paragraph,
Okay, then leave that in.
but it
but-
needs to be.
Okay.
And we were looking, the Board of Health was concerned with, under the purpose, it says health of the public as the very last piece of that sentence.
So do you have a marked up version?
Not your version, but I have,
No, this was Dick, you added this to the, what was already there.
thank you, it's,
And that was what,
I tried
Great,
to,
thank
I
you.
tried to take your things
Oh.
and incorporate them into that, plus what I got from the fair.
Maybe it
In
sent us
some
all
ways
your
to incorporate
concerns.
it in.
oh, great, thank you.
And-
Yeah, no, so this actually addresses the two biggest concerns that the board
okay.
had, the Board of Health had, which
Okay.
was taking out the public health language.
Yeah, yeah,
From the Board of Health.
because it's,
Is there
Not-
anything else looking at that
not
one that you would
intended.
have us modify?
No, it was, I mean, as far as my board, when they met, and I believe, Dick, you were there for the entire
and I
conversation.
appreciate getting that piece of paper, and that's what I used.
Right.
Was your, yeah, thank you.
They were particularly concerned that the health of the public was it was
Yeah, and that was
put as a part of the
not
purpose,
the
which is
purpose,
not.
nor are you able to make that
Designate your
assessment.
circle that.
Right,
Okay, we
and
got that.
taking us out because we
Yeah.
can't have authority over something we have no jurisdiction over.
So, Kevin,
Or not.
the last sentence under enforcement and penalties, just to be clear, and I think we agreed on this, the Board of Selectmen or their designee.
Or designate, yeah. Okay.
Or designee
Good.
shall be the enforcement, and
Okay.
just, Ben, leave it there. That allows us, at any time, we may choose to do Peter, but if we don't, we can do it, you know, when we hear an elephant's coming to town, call up Peter and tell him he's designated. It gives us a lot of
Right.
flexibility.
Right. Well, I always thought that we had to designate without having to have it in there, but yes, it's better to have it in there, then nobody's gonna question.
So remove
I
police.
wanna see a selectman.
Yeah, I
Good,
think
I'm with you, I'm
Remove
with
the
you.
board
Okay.
designees.
I'm
I
with
want to
you.
be down there saying that
Or
is definitely a
designate.
link.
Okay.
We
So
can get the
here's my
police
take on
involved
it.
if we
Here's my
choose
take on
to.
it. If we can maybe work it out, things like designate, get the wording worked out, then I need to take it to somebody like Martha Sanders and say, Martha, here's what we're thinking of presenting at town meeting as the amendments to the thing. Do you have any problems with it? I mean, that's the thing to work out before the town meeting. So that would be my approach to how I handle this, but it's up to us to, try to agree kind of with the wording.
I don't have
I
a
guess-
problem with the wording.
I don't have any problem with the
No,
wording.
I don't have a problem with the wording either.
Except for that
The
one
changes.
change you
It
wanted
does,
to make.
yeah.
Everybody's had a chance to read the wording.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only change is the at or designate,
Yep.
but other than that, feels good.
I'm
Yeah.
fine
Yeah.
with that.
I'm sorry,
and-
Wendy, you didn't have a chance to read this already.
No, that's okay, but I can see that you've included.
Okay,
most of our
and you see how I
comments.
changed the fees,
To our
Yeah,
warning.
Yeah. that's very much in keeping
Yeah,
with
that's
most
fine
of the
too.
ones that we do, which is a warning and then a this and then
Some
that.
people may not be as tuned in to all of our bylaws, and it's good to give them a warning if they're not.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree.
Get that elephant off my lawn.
How many times have we told you?
It's gonna cost you $100 next time.
Is that what you know about Looney Tunes?
Okay, I think we're set on this, we agree this is gonna
Okay.
go in, I think it would be a courtesy to let Martha know what's going on and
Yep.
explain it, whether it's you, Dick, or it's you, Kevin.
Oh,
You can decide between
okay,
the
yeah,
two of
sure,
you,
good.
but just
But
one of
That's the
you
next
need to-
step, we all agree, right?
That's courtesy,
Okay.
not a
If you have any
requirement.
other input, after you read that in more
Okay,
detail,
thank you.
you know, we take it in, but we've just made a decision as to where we are,
Yeah,
okay.
it looks
Next.
inclusive of what we wanted.
Yep,
All right.
and the other question was around the fines. You were gonna ask for some clarification, Kevin, on that?
The non-criminal,
So we had a conversation around the non-criminal.
Okay.
Apparently, I was not aware, I know you're being relatively new as well. A couple of times over the years, a similar request had gone to town meeting, and were rejected, where we expand the authority for fines by the health director.
Okay.
And so, we had the conversation basically that, you know, gave the example that sort of spurred the conversation with the smoke detectors. And we were just talking about the,
So that actually, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but, or I guess I did, but what we were trying to do is avoid that and bring in a mechanism, certainly with the ability to have a warning and then to have a small fine and then to set up a series of checks at the local level prior to either going to the court, either as a civil suit or a criminal suit.
so how were you thinking, what were you trying to, what kind of a law were
So-
you thinking of writing?
So what is there right now, and I believe Martha Morrison was involved, there's some minutes from the Board of Health back in 2011 or something, wherever it was adopted. She was at meetings, and they were very specific to address the food code and the tobacco regulations.
Yes, okay.
So what I was hoping to do was to remove the specific language and just say, we have non-criminal disposition over the local regulations.
Okay,
And then the Board of Health, with a full public hearing, just like we're doing with our septic regulations, can begin to adopt some of the state regulations. And one of those would be the state sanitary code, which allows us to go into residences that are rented out or that are occupied by others, and they call us in. And the state tells us we have to go in if we are asked. There's no options.
okay.
So once I'm there, I find something wrong. I then have a mechanism to, beyond just the letter and sending another letter and sending another letter, then I can maybe, then I want to be able to have something official. Here is your warning.
Well, the letter is official.
It is, but
It
strangely
doesn't have
enough.
the teeth that you
it-
want.
It doesn't have the teeth. I had 2 housing complaints since I've been here. One of them, the person responded in the way you would expect. We went in, did the inspection, whatever disagreements were going on between the tenant and the landlord was that, but the landlord received the list, and after some effort and reaching out to him, he came into the office, he worked with the building inspector, the plumbing inspector, and myself to get the things up to code so that it was all resolved. This other one did not. As a matter of fact, didn't even accept the letters. And we got to a point where the only option was to either pursue it criminally or pursue it through civil court. And it was recommended by the people, I asked several different people, both local, in other towns, the interim administrator, and at the state level, the housing coordinator, what the best avenue was, and they said criminal, so we did. And again, the gentleman did not respond. He showed up at them, but he kept saying, I'm not going to, I don't want to, I want to make another date. So we got to the point where he was being arraigned, and literally the day before, he called up the building inspector and said, come see my smoke detectors.
He said what?
He said, come see my smoke detectors.
Oh, come see, okay.
And
So
we
we have
went
a
in without
solution.
charging him a fee,
Yeah.
we didn't,
Yeah,
we just
right.
went in, saw it, great,
Yeah.
filed the paperwork with the court,
Yeah.
we're done.
what was our exposure? Do you know how much we spent? Legal fees and filing fees, roughly? Doesn't have to be a dime, exactly.
2 to 3 emails and 2 conversations with Jeff Blake.
Good, thank you, Wendy.
They didn't go to
Thank
court
you.
with you.
No, they did not.
They were prepared to, though, were they not?
They were prepared to,
Yep.
but because he resolved, I called him as soon as I found out it was resolved, I talked to you,
That's right.
called him and said, we don't need you. I did need to call him from the courthouse because I had failed to file a piece of paper that the judge wanted, but he gave me the information I needed, and I went and did that. Resolved, I got to close the file on that.
Nice job, Wendy.
But it would be nice if I had a mechanism to say, at the local level, here's a $25 fine. A month later, we haven't heard from you, here's a $25 fine. And do that for a year about your smoke detector, before we go to what we're recommended to do, which is file criminal complaints.
But by the way, the next time you have a smoke detector thing like this,